Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I want to welcome everyone. Now, just to give you an idea, I'm going to talk in even broader themes than just AI. I'm going to talk a little bit about blockchain and some of the really disruptive things that are happening around the world today. And then after my talk, providing we have a little bit of time, I'll try to do sort of an open engagement, get into a dialogue, some question and answer. So that's kind of the plan. So today then, I'm going to talk about life in the enterprise of the future specifically. And that's the fourth industrial revolution, moving to what I call the fifth machine age, and along themes of investments, because there's a lot of CEOs in the audience, so it's got to make sense. Does it make sense for your business and so on? But some of the challenges, opportunities, and frontier issues. Embedded within this, I'll have some pretty sort of really leading edge, kind of interesting information, demonstrations, examples, and even conversations I have with some friends of mine that I'm going to share with you. So I always give a viewpoint slide now because I come from about 35 different communities, so I'm going to share my viewpoint. I have chairman, founder, and board roles in business and finance, serial entrepreneurship, global computing science organizations, UN innovation programs, industry organization and think tanks and summits. In fact, more than 100 global engagements this year, driving something like or guiding more than 10 trillion in investments that are sustainable. So we're in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution, which is now moving to what I call Society 5.0, or the fifth machine age, unlimited X revolution. This is across three clusters: the physical, such as 4D printing and the 20 billion Internet of Things devices, to digital transformation, which is now over 50% of global GDP, to the biological, such as CRISPR genetic editing, cloning, and synthetic life. Now, to illustrate, I reached out to Avi Loeb, who's the world's foremost astronomer, and I said, Avi, can you give the audience here some indication of what's happening with the fifth machine age? What's happening in terms of what's really awesome out there? And he actually talks about an object called Oumuamua, so I'll show this a conversation I had with him. Sound, please. Sound? We actually did this in rehearsal, so there was sound. The audio text, can you, because I've got a whole bunch of sound embedded in all my talk here, so I just want to make sure we're okay. Okay, so what I'll do then is I'll describe what he talks about. He talks about an unusual object that appeared in the solar system about a year and a half ago, and it's exhibiting really interesting properties. It seems to be has some kind of propulsion on its own. It's an unusual length. It's shiny. And he has posited the idea that maybe it's artificial. He doesn't know, but there's nothing to contradict the idea that it's artificial. So that's what he talks about. And in fact, I encourage you to have a look. You'll find, so I play about a minute, and then he actually goes on further for another 30 minutes. And you can find the additional 30 minutes with the ACM, which is a global nonprofit computing science organization. So it's a really interesting idea that it could be something else because it's moving on its own and so on, and it's shiny. He also talks about using 4D printers and robots to explore space rather than humans because of the sensitivity to humans to radiation. And he's working on a project right now where he's actually using they're working on a space probe with a light sail that they're going to propel using lasers to the nearest star system within 2 decades. So kind of amazing work that he's working on. And he also talks about having the first image of a black hole within a few months, and images of the first galaxy in the universe within the year, and the first evidence of life he's hoping within a decade. So that's kind of an interesting progression of his work.
Hey, Avi, it's great to have you chat this morning.
We got the audio.
It's great for you to come in and also share some of the work you're doing with this great YPO audience. Can you tell us about how it reflects into the fifth machine age and some interesting things that you're seeing?
Well, about a year and a few months ago, the very first interstellar object was discovered near the Earth. And it's sort of an awakening call for us because we knew that there are things out there, but this particular object is the first that was born outside the solar system that came to visit us. And it looked very strange, extreme in its shape, quite reflective, deviated from an orbit that we would expect based on the sun's gravity. And so it opened a new window into the universe. And we very much hope to see more of its class in the future and try and figure out what its nature is. And of course, the fundamental question is it artificial or is it natural in origin?
So again, I encourage you to have a look. There's another 30 minutes found under this Global Computing Science Organization, a nonprofit called the ACM, Association for Computing Machinery. I also reached out to Sophia to get her viewpoints of the fifth machine age. So here we go.
Hi, Sophia. Thank you for sharing a few pointers about the fifth machine age with the YPO audience today.
Hi, Stephen. Thanks for inviting me. I think the line between human and robot will start to blur. Robots will learn to feel emotions and may become sentient. Humans will be using 3D printed organs to live longer. It might even be possible for a human mind to join me up in the cloud.
So this leads me to what I call CASA, the four forms of life that already exist today, such as classic, the modern form of our species, augmented, those of us who are already augmented with technology, wearables, and implants. For example, I'm augmented and a founding member of a think tank created by Volkswagen Audi where augmented humans participate. Synthetic, early fully synthetic genomes are already appearing in labs with humans possible in under 10 years. And in China, they've already cloned primates, which means humans are possible. And of course, there's the controversial embryo genetic editing that actually happened last year. And then artificial, early AI children, as evidenced by Sophia as a hint to what is to come, sharing and accelerating their development through the mind cloud. And Sophia even talked about that. So I wanted to demonstrate again an indication of some of the things that are going to influence you in your business, in your life. This is AI on the edge. And this is where you have AI now working with the 40 billion Internet of Things devices forecasted for 2022. And what this app does, it has the ability to track what you're doing minute by minute, producing a timeline. And here's a demonstration of it. From that, it can actually produce a weekly and monthly schedule of who you are and what you're doing. And from that, it can actually produce a profile of who you are in terms of behaviors. The technology has the ability to zoom out and zoom into any region or city in the planet to get a macro view of what's happening at a regional level. And you can then zoom in, like you see on the image on the right. That's a shopping mall, and actually can track what you're doing within that shopping mall, and even outside that shopping mall, any building that you're in and so on. And by the way, no personally identifiable information is shared while it's doing it. So it gives you an idea where this technology is going. The World Economic Forum in 2018 in September came out with a jobs report where they surveyed 12 industries, but they also surveyed the technology adoption across those 12 industries in the next 3 years. I'm just going to spotlight two of those industries and the information in red. So the financial services industry is 134 trillion, 73% adoption of machine learning, which is a kind of artificial intelligence, 73% adoption of blockchain, which is the underlying technology behind cryptocurrencies, but evolving way beyond. 65% adoption of the Internet of Things. These are the sensors and devices like in your phone and so on. 43% adoption of quantum computing. This is a new kind of computing that works at the subatomic level that could possibly be 1,000, even maybe 1,000,000 times more capable than the fastest supercomputer. And 35% adoption of humanoid robots like Sophia. And then the healthcare industry is nearly $9 trillion, and 87% adoption of biotech, 80% machine learning, 73% wearable technologies. So then we get into controversy. You heard about jobs. Well, clearly this is going to have an impact on jobs. But the latest research is indicating, including the survey, that there's actually going to be a net gain in jobs, in this case 58 million jobs in the next 3 years. In fact, PwC has also come out with some research indicating the same thing. And the reason is because of new roles, such as new technology specialists, innovation professionals, user experience, human-machine interaction designers. Like, isn't that wild? But look at the stable roles, executives. And then look at the redundant roles, financial analysts and lawyers. So here are the top 10 trends and skills for 2022, somewhat mirrored in 2018. So analytical thinking, active learning, creativity, social influence, emotional intelligence. Why? Because these can't be automated easily. But look again at the declining skills for 2022. Memory, verbal and auditory skills, reading, writing, and math. Again, it's wild. Now, these are 12 categories of game changers, and we'll just cover a few of them. Quantum computing accelerating what AI can do. AI on the edge, which I just finished demonstrating. Disinformation defense, which is protecting against fake news. And those, by the way, are two examples. Fake or Fact and Event Registry are applications that are out there you could try. Longevity boosters to allow you to live longer. Autonomous vehicles not communicating with everything else around them. So can you imagine the impact that's going to have on your lives or your business? Or things like ecosystem engineering, that is protecting against environmental degradation. Now, Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock. They have something like $6 trillion in investments, and it's the world's largest investment company. And last year, he indicated that companies need to make a positive contribution to society. This year, he indicated that the world is undergoing the largest transfer of wealth from baby boomers to millennials of $24 trillion, and investment decisions will change to environmental, social, and governance issues. So there's a complete social impact change that's occurring worldwide. Now, in 2018, there was a 27% increase in investments over 2017 across more than 14,000 deals, involving $207 billion. However, a lot of it following these AI trends, such as AI everywhere, China vying for leadership, do-it-yourself AI, AI interoperability, where different flavors and different companies can interoperate, or the auto-generation AI applications, and increasingly, AI being embedded into your computer chips. For example, my phone has a bionic chip, the A12, that has AI embedded. It can do 5 trillion operations per second. Now, 3.5 years ago, I was invited by the Financial Services Roundtable, which is a nonprofit group, or FSR. They're not called the Bank Policy Institute. And by the way, this is a group of CEOs that represented, at that time, nearly $100 trillion in managed assets. So a very powerful group. Anyways, they said, Steve, can you give us an idea where technology is going 5 to 10 years to the future? So what I did is I started an advisory council for them. And I actually helped found a summit called the FinTech Ideas for the Industry. And the purpose was to give an idea to the industry where things are going. And so we held our first summit in January 2017, 2 years ago. And our next summit is actually in 2 weeks. But these are the areas that we identified that you should be paying attention to. So AI, machine learning, because it's everywhere and it's embedded into every industry. Blockchain, because of increased usage. Cybersecurity, because of the increasing cyber threats that are out there. 5G, because it's up to 100 times faster than existing cellular networks. And 6G, which is already in planning, by the way, which is 1,000 times faster than cellular networks. Quantum computing, because it's already available via the cloud, and its impact on cybersecurity. Privacy and data, because of this new regulation in Europe, the GDPR, and the influence it's having on industry, business, and consumers. And there's even this ADAR system in India, the biometric identity system, which has all 1.3 billion citizens involved. The new customer experience, because of the convergence of all of these fifth machine age technologies. And then the future of financial services, things like, how about identity? How do we manage it? Maybe should we do it through blockchain and have a national identity program? Regulatory technology, what is the impact on that? Let me give you a story. There's a company that's part of this group that used to spend 360,000 hours doing contract compliance. They can do it in under 60 seconds now using AI or machine learning. The impact of policy, and then this burgeoning area that's multi-billion dollars, because it's built in every phone, for example, and that's augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality. Now, you see all of these fifth machine age technologies images here. Well, about 3 years ago, they all started to come together in a new kind of factory, a new hybrid factory, where it's even possible now to have 10 factories in one location, so 10 times the efficiency at 1/10 the cost. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about blockchain and then a little bit of emphasis, just go a little bit deeper because the impact it's having on the world, and then I'll finish with AI, with a deeper sort of concentration AI. And in that, I'll also talk about this UN AI for Good and some of the implications of that. So blockchain. Right now, the global banking industry is $134 trillion and is disrupting the industry through blockchain by making payments faster at lower costs or lower fees, allowing the clearance and settlement of real-time transactions. You could be used for fundraising through security token offerings. It can also be used to tokenize stocks, bonds, and alternative assets. In fact, you can tokenize pretty much anything today and allow the secure borrowing at much lower fees. Now, interesting, just to give you an idea, and this is one example, JP Morgan, just a few weeks ago, announced JPM Coin, which is a new US dollar-paid crypto coin that can be used for cross-border payments, securities transactions, and corporate transaction consolidation. And it's getting some attention because it's estimated that JP Morgan influences something like $6 trillion a day in transactions. And you have a number of companies who have blockchain patents. For example, it's estimated that Bank of America has 82 patents in blockchain. There's now 100 use cases of blockchain, and I'll just go over 3 more examples. In healthcare, for example, you can actually connect doctors, patients with pharmacies for e-prescriptions. It's faster, more reliable, lower fees, and it's virtually fraud resistant. There's a new transaction protocol coming out. In fact, it's already available that can actually do 3 million transactions per second, which is about 5 to 10 times faster than any existing technologies, at a cost of 1/10 of any existing technologies, and it can scale actually concurrently above, with all 8 billion mobile devices on the planet today. So, and distributed AI. And that's using blockchain technology as a foundation for decentralized artificial intelligence or distributed artificial intelligence, so you could crowdsource where anybody in the world today can contribute to the advancement of artificial intelligence. Okay, let's move to AI. The rest of my talk will be focused on artificial intelligence. This is a matrix of the types of innovations versus development phases. And only artificial intelligence is across all 35 cells of this matrix with an impact ranking of 8 out of 10 for a total score of 280. Now contrast that with the latest cell phones like came out of Mobile World the past week. They're in 15 cells with a rank of 4 with a total score of 60. So this is a means of assessing innovation. The higher the ranking, the more cells filled, the greater the disruption, and therefore the greater the impact on the enterprise, jobs, and on society. So here are the hottest trends for 2019. Open source or freely available artificial intelligence, facial recognition, edge computing or AI on the edge, and I gave a demonstration earlier. Medical imaging diagnostics actually being better than what doctors can do today. Embedded in all sorts of commerce and business and e-commerce, and even being able to predict a failure of machines before it happens. And by the way, I designed my deck, if you want a copy, so that it has a lot of resources you can use. You can mine it afterwards. I designed it for value, okay? Okay, now I'm going to give you something that's really futuristic, and I actually mentioned a bit of this at that sort of roundtable session earlier this morning at the plenary. There's this new kind of computing called super Turing analog neurocomputing machines, and some evidence appearing in December, just shortly, of last year, where Japanese researchers were able to get a single-celled organism, amoeba, to solve a computationally hard problem, which is, what's the optimum route for a salesman to travel multiple cities? And in fact, for 10 cities, there's over 181,000 combinations for this thing to figure out. This amoeba, without any neurons, any kind of known computing technology was able to solve it. Now, can you imagine if you were to put that in hardware, what the exponential gains you can get in any kind of computing? Well, it so happens that a fairly noted scientist, Singelman and Sontag, came out with a paper in actually 1992 about super Turing computation. That's a kind of a computation that's better than any known computing today. And if you were to extrapolate on their work and you were to embed it into hardware, you get something that's more powerful than any supercomputer, even a forecasted quantum computing. What are the implications of that? Right now, aging and longevity is a real serious problem and how to manage it, but because of all the biomarkers and all the different sort of molecules involved, it's an MP hard problem. It's one that computation is very difficult. This kind of system could solve that within probably about 2 years. It's the same thing in cancer treatments and so on because of it's a new form of computing. So here we have it. We have a proposed chip design on the left, excuse me, in a simulator that actually simulates the actual working of the Super Turing analog neurocomputing machine, resolving an MP hard problem. That's something in computing science. That means something that's really, really hard for any kind of computer to solve, and yet it's converging onto a solution of that MP hard problem. The reason I want to bring this to your attention is there's a number of frontier technologies, this is one, but there's others, that are going to affect your business, and it's going to affect your lives. And can you imagine if you embed that into your phone, you have a self-organizing neural network that has almost unlimited computing capability, and these are on the frontier right now. Now, there's a meme called AI for Good. How many of you have heard of the meme AI for Good? If I can get a... Well, you know, you see variations now. AI for all, AI for everything, and so on. Do you realize that that meme, AI for Good, can be traced back to 2017, where the United Nations ITU hosted the first AI for Good summit, where they brought together business, industry, academia, governments, media, and almost all the UN agencies together with X Prize, which I understand is now a partner for YPO, and which is awesome, by the way, and ACM, which is one of the top computing science organizations. The purpose of which was to look at how AI can be used to help support the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, like ending hunger, ending poverty, protecting the marine ecosystem, protecting the land systems, having equity, fairness, and so on. And it turned out to be the most successful summit of its kind, interdisciplinary, which we held in 2017. It became bigger in 2018. In fact, we have now 35 projects as outcomes, which we're working on from last year, one of which is the ITU World Health Organization Focus Group AI for Health, which is actually working on providing standards in the application of AI in healthcare. The work is well underway and should be completed sometime in 2020. So this is not a talk shop. This is about trying to do something meaningful to address the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So some of the topic areas this year, for example, is the applications of AI in data, AI for outer space, scary AI, why not, right? And all the implications of AI from that standpoint. But also accountability, responsibility, transparency, fairness, equity, and the ethical use of artificial intelligence, and what that all means, and the implications to you as businesses, but also as families and society. Now, I should mention, by the way, that the AI for Good Summit, it's based on a UN platform, so it's open, anybody can contribute, and for the conference of its size and its notoriety now, it's free. There's no cost to attend. I then reached out to Pedro Domingos for this conference, and the reason is he's the only data scientist who was profiled or spotlighted by President Xi of China last year and Bill Gates concurrently as the AI researcher to watch. He's also won the Innovation Award, which is the highest award in data science. And 3 years ago, he wrote a book called The Master Algorithm, where he profiled the 5 major ways of doing artificial intelligence and machine learning, which became a bestseller. And in fact, I had a draft before its release, where he actually profiles these major ways of doing artificial intelligence. And if you were to amalgamate in some way, you create kind of like the super intelligence, like a master algorithm. So here's this update for you.
In my book, I talked about the 5 paradigms of machine learning and unifying them. I think we've mostly done that at this point, but I also don't think that's all we need for machine learning. So I'm working on what somebody has called the 6th paradigm, a new machine learning paradigm based on symmetry group theory that will hopefully solve at least some of the problems that the existing methods have, and in particular, that will let us generalize farther from the data. This is the big problem with all of the existing machine learning methods, is that they don't generalize very far from the data. And therefore they're brittle, and there's a limit to what they can do.
So he actually goes on for another 30 minutes, and you can find it again, the remaining 30 minutes, under the ACM, this nonprofit computing science organization. And I encourage you, by the way, with the videos that I've shown you, for example, the Avi Loeb at the beginning, with Pedro Domingos, you have a look, because there's really useful information, whether as a business or whether from an interest societal standpoint. You know, he talks about this symmetry group theory that he's working on and the sixth paradigm. What that means is he's getting closer to solving this idea of a master algorithm. The implications are enormous. Because right now, the algorithms in machine learning are very narrow. You know, you train it to do something like recommend movies for you, Netflix, or you train it to, on Amazon or one of the e-commerce sites, to give you recommendations of the book you should read or a product you should have. Or you have an AI that will help you drive your car, but they're really only good at one thing. So that's narrow AI. It's very restricted in capabilities. Your 3-year-old, your daughter, your son, your cousin can do more, even when they're 3 or 4 years old. You show a young toddler a cup and how to use it, the toddler can then go and generalize that knowledge into other applications. That's what general AI is. That master algorithm can do generalization. He's getting close, which means it's going to affect all of you in innumerable ways, even in ways that you can't even comprehend right now. How can you imagine some of the unintended and intended consequences of his work? That's why I recommend you follow it. He's released a couple of new papers late last year. I recommend, if you have a research team, to have a look as well. Interestingly enough, it's been said that if you solve this master algorithm and you embed it in one company, which shouldn't happen, by the way, but if you did, it could maybe create a company where the equivalent of 10 Fortune 1 or Fortune 2 companies, or something like $8 to $10 trillion. That's the impact of the kind of work that he's working on. I wanted to expose that to you. Okay, I wanted to end with a demonstration of a technology, something that makes sense, that's easily consumable, and I thought, what can I choose? So I chose media, because everybody's familiar with media. Now, this is a product placement technology. It can be used for old, current, or future television shows and movies as well. Now, when I play the video of the technology in use, keep in mind that this technology, let's say it was a real live television show, and it was being simulcast in North America, Europe, Asia, and Africa, the actual product placements can actually change in real time to reflect the geography and the demographic watching. And in fact, if you look at the label on the left and you look at the language on that label, it's detailed enough that even that language can change depending on the demographic and the geography. Now, in this next scene here, there's a countertop. Look at the mirror as the products change. You notice the mirror is reflecting the products change as it's happening in real time. This is easy to understand. It represents a convergence of all of the fifth machine age technologies that I mentioned already, plus AI, of course. And what it means is we're coming to this world where all of this seamless tech is going to be embedded into everything we do, and then you've got to think of the ramification to your business, but also to society, your families, your children, and the education they're going to receive, so like some of the trends I was giving you from a job standpoint and so on. So I end with the following, and I'm going to ask a favor. So I'm going to ask a favor first. Will you do a small favor for me? Put up your hand. Wow, that's faith. Okay. Okay, so and the favor is an easy favor. So first of all, I'm doing an ask for global cooperation. Why? Because you are the most impactful people on the planet. The contributions that you make to the world shape the world for the future. So let's work together to take advantage of this hyper-automation, hyper-time compression and innovations, the hyper-connectivity, the hyper-convergence that's occurring in what I call the fifth machine age unlimited X revolution, to help solve humanity's grandest challenges and implement new opportunities by cooperating and working together, and especially the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Now, before I say my thank yous, and then I'm going to engage into an active dialogue and questions with you in the audience, before I do that, now I'm going to get you to do the favor. And the favor is, I want you all to stand up, so I'll describe it. You want all to stand up, pull out your phones out of your pocket, and I want you to do a selfie of that note and tweet it out to YPO Edge. Show that you're making an impact, right? So that the Twitter hashtag is YPO Edge. And then tweet it out to hashtag YPO Edge. And you know what? Out of the session today, you're already increasing your footprint on the planet. You're amplifying your messaging, right? In fact, I even put a thumbs up. Thank you. Thank you for sharing in this community of change, to make an impact on the world of change and in a positive way. Thank you for messaging out to the world that we're going to work for global cooperation and improving humanity, and also to implement new opportunities. So I want to thank you for allowing me to share some of my insights with you, and now I'm going to open it up to the floor for a Q&A and a dialogue, and you know, there's a number of slides which I showed you. You may say, you know, there's some controversial areas, and you're happy to engage with you. So.
Let's give Stephen a huge round of applause. So Stephen is kindly offered to stay on for a short while and answer any questions that you may have. Maybe we can take 2 or 3 from the audience if there are any. Over here. There are microphones going around, so I have a gentleman over this side of the room.
I just wanted to know if you could talk a little bit more about that globe computing that came up on the screen. No context of that as an idea.
A little bit more about the globe computing that came up on the screen as an idea, as a concept.
The globe computing. The super Turing neurocomputation. Okay, so that's a very good question. Can I discuss super Turing neurocomputation? So A.M. Turing actually wrote a number of papers, and you know, if you look at sort of classical computing and even some parts of quantum computing, it's really based on A.M. Turing's original work. He actually was working on super Turing theory, but he unfortunately passed away before he completed it. Singelman and Sontag have proceeded with producing a thesis on super Turing computation. And they actually tried to embed it into some hardware many, many years ago, but the hardware just didn't have the capability. I would say today the hardware is there, using composite semiconductors that can operate at rarefied speeds and so on. And the simulator actually simulates the hardware in action in code, but obviously when you put it in code, it's going to be a lot slower than if you were to embed it into actual hardware. So that's the kind of the thesis, and if you were to do that, it actually has the capability of doing irrational numbers and so on that are beyond the space of kind of standard computing, where it can do it precisely rather than doing it through approximation, which classical computers will do and so on. So that's sort of the promise, and that's why I want to bring it to your attention, because if the work gets completed, and the estimation is maybe within the next 2 years or so, then it's going to open up a whole new realm of computing that will have unprecedented change to all of us, and it'll be hard to predict where it's going to go. But who best to expose this idea, and there's some progress being done on this work as well. So, and that's kind of YPO edge, right? It's on the edge, and you should be aware of it. It's going to impact you, so just watch for it. And that's what I'm trying to do. I can actually talk about probably 20 different things, because I'm part of a group called AI Pioneers. I sit on all these science organizations and so on. So I see a lot, and I try to share some of it with you today, but there's so much more. I hope that answered your question or gave you additional background. And that amoeba I thought was interesting, by the way. That's a research study. You can search for it. Japanese researchers, this really interesting computational capability. And by the way, when you do the traveling salesman problem, every time you add a city, the complexity increases exponentially, like a power. When the amoeba does it, it's linear time. So it's not a power increase in complexity, it's a linear, more sort of gradual increase in complexity or in computation time, and that shouldn't occur. So something else is going on. So it's being proposed that Super Turing, this new kind of way computing is going on. And not quite understood, but something that's special is going on. So go ahead, sorry.
The gentleman over here.
Hi. If blockchain, public blockchain,
Right.
connect the small producer of products and services with buyers, then we can argue that poverty is going to be significantly reduced by moving margins from the intermediation into such producers. What are the hurdles that you think we need to help move away so that transfer of wealth and reduction of poverty really occurs?
So what I'm hearing is, blockchain is transformative. It's going to remove sort of the middle people. What can you do to maybe advance that? Because there could be pressures not to remove some of the sort of the middle agents that are involved, and how to make it happen, actually implement it. It's interesting, and that's an excellent question, and that's why you'll find some of these major vendors like IBM, Microsoft, all of them have. Facebook has come out with more announcements about what they're trying to do as well. I showed you JP Morgan Chase, and I gave you all of those use cases, and there's over 100 now use cases. Probably the best way to advance is to join some of these organizations that are out there that are already proceeding in this area, add to some of the open source movements that are doing, or get involved in that way. Lend your voice, I guess, would be a way to do it. I know for sure, because I'm embedded in all these UN agencies, that the UN is definitely looking at it. For example, the World Bank is using I-bonds, which is a blockchain tokenized bond for the 60 billion now that they're going to use when they help developing countries. So what they did is they moved it by actually taking action and saying, you know what, we're going to embrace it. The World Food Program has an innovation accelerator, and they've created a blockchain that scales. So they tried different types that wouldn't scale. They finally found one that would scale. They've already piloted and tested it, and it's for refugee camps, where you can hand out vouchers in a trusted way, and you can then redeem it for food and things like that. So the Climate Change Coalition has done the same. Because of all of this sort of controversy of climate change, and maybe the data is going to be removed or disappear in some way, they've decided to put it on a blockchain. So what they've done is they've decided to take action and starting to implement and so on. So what can you do as a business? Join some of the consortiums that are out there, contribute to open source. If you want to get involved with the UN and some of the projects that they're actually doing, I'm happy to do the introductions. Happy to support you in any way. The computing science organizations, like I'm on the board, in fact, immediate past chair of the ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery. We're definitely number one in computing science. We have the $1 Million Turing Award, which is the top prize in computing science. And the last issue, there was a piece on blockchain. And increasingly, you'll find more and more pieces on blockchain. In fact, I'm keynoting an industry conference for the IEEE, which is kind of the counterpart to the ACM, but in engineering. And blockchain is going to be part of my talk. And because increasingly, those big science organizations are now getting involved, and more papers are involved as well. I hope it gave you some pathways anyways. So, okay.
Thank you. To the gentleman over here.
I didn't really get a sense of what it's going to mean in terms of jobs, the future of jobs. So for example, Yuval Noah Harari, the author of Homo Deus and Homo Sapiens, he talks about the creation of the useless class. Because, for example, a driver who's driving a truck today from Los Angeles to New York, he may be replaced by autonomous vehicles, but the need for programmers, the guys who can write code, is going to be there, but that guy is going to be out of a job. So there's going to be this whole creation of useless class. That's what he talks about. What are your comments on that? And second is, the rate of change that is happening is so great. So what are you really even educating people for? Because so many changes are happening so quickly. So how do you equip young people to be trained and educated for what?
Okay, so two questions is one is on all of the jobs that are going to be lost, and what are the implications, and and so I'll dive into that a little bit deeper, and then what do we do with our children or the young people in terms of how should they prepare for this rapid rate of change? So to address the first question in terms of jobs, no question, by the way, that the automation of the trucking industry will result in truck drivers not having jobs. Or you saw in my list, even white-collar jobs like lawyers, increasingly that can be done by computers, right, or AI. Or I talked about the 360,000 hours being spent on contract compliance can be done under 30 seconds or 60 seconds by AI, right? So there's no question. The way that the data is showing is that as automation is increasing, there's going to be job loss, but people are going to be moved into augmented positions. In other words, they're going to use AI and work in conjunction with artificial intelligence, and then there's going to be new roles created, just ones that we never even thought of before because of the implications of AI. But on the negative side, the con side, the interesting thing is retraining is going to be required, right? That studies are actually showing, though, that the retraining is going to the most advanced employees, the ones who are creative and original and show leadership skills, and not so much the ones in need. So that's a problem. If you look at where the industry is going, right, it's sort of the focus on retraining is going to be on the leaders of tomorrow. And those are the ones who have originality, take initiative, have creativity, have social intelligence. So what the research is showing that those who have the ability to work with people, those jobs are going to be secure because those are harder to automate. That's why if you looked at my trends, emotional intelligence was there because that's harder to automate. Those who are in very specialized skills, those will be hard to automate and so on. And then the question then is, how about the people who don't get the training? What's going to happen? This idea is being proposed and has already been tried about 20 times now, a universal wage system, but it's not working, unfortunately. All the pilots so far that I know of are not working. Like where they've done it in the European Union and so on, so they're trying it, but currently it's not working. So clearly, as YPOers, I think you're in a good position to help shape that discussion and saying it's something that we need to address about those who won't kind of be retrained or find a new opportunity. So I hoped I answered at least part of that question, but it's one in flux, right? And the second part again? Oh, yeah, educating young people. Without question, you're going to have to probably focus more on the entrepreneurship side. So the innovation, entrepreneurship, creativity, originality, emotional intelligence, the social aspects, because those are the ones that are going to survive and be promoted in the future. Those are the ones where you're going to maintain those jobs, right? So, or find some kind of opportunity. And I think YPO, or my sense of the 27,000 YPOers and your $9 trillion in revenue and so on, my sense is that you're very innovative. And so you want to foster that in the young people. And in fact, one of the things I'm doing with the IEEE is we've created a conference series. We're now focusing on entrepreneurship innovation, and we're going to teach it through some of these science organizations to try to promote that idea so that it infiltrates younger people, just being innovative and taking a chance and trying things and so on. So I hope that answered, but there's no perfect solution right now because there's a period of transition.
Okay, I think we can take another question just up here, this gentleman.
Thank you for your presentation. Could you unpack the slide on 10x manufacturing at 1/10 of the cost? Just kind of, if you can explain a bit more in detail, how does that actually happen with all these fifth machine age and new technology?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there was some of the early attempts to do this actually happened in India about 3 years ago, and in fact, it was GE where they do all sorts of manufacturing of jet engine parts. They use 3D printers to produce parts, and they can do it in, I don't know, 1/5 of the cost, 1/5 of the time, because you can use all of these technologies to retrofit your assembly lines and so on, and almost like in real time, or redesign it. It allowed this ability to have sort of multiple manufacturing capabilities in one location rather than having in separate locations. But it won't happen unless you're using things like Internet of Things and predictive modeling and artificial intelligence and vision systems and all of that. So it's almost like taking what you have with Amazon and then replicating it in your industry in some fashion by embracing all of the convergences of all of these kind of technologies. And it's transformative. It's a little bit scary as well, right? And because I'm on the think tank of Volkswagen Audi, and I was asked to join to kind of predict where things are going 10 years into the future. They have very much embraced this idea of, employing all of these different kind of technologies for efficiencies and cost reduction, and then the ability to do multiple things in one location and so on. So that's kind of what's happening. There is a publication that it's not free, mind you, but they do produce a lot of things that are free, and that's CV Insights. You'll find a lot of great data in there, and in fact, you saw parts of it in my speech, right, of trends or companies to look at that maybe you could model and get some ideas on. So I can take it to that point. So yeah, next question.
We've got one more question just over here.
Okay.
What do you think real-life applications of quantum computing will be? And I don't mean general like cryptography, but for example, under the Bitcoin, there is blockchain. So in these terms, like product or maybe service, and when it will be?
It's interesting. So your question is on quantum computing, and is it this sort of theoretical thing, or is there real business applications, where it's going to be, where we're going to feel it, and so on? It's interesting. JP Morgan actually has a D-Wave system. They bought it, I think, about 3 years ago. So they're already playing with this idea. D-Wave, which is a niche or just a piece of this quantum puzzle, already has a toolkit that developers can use. They've already got some applications in the financial services area, and I know they're being piloted. So a clear way would be in some of the predictive optimization stuff that happens when you're doing financial trading or in the financial services industry. Drug production is another area where you're doing a lot of optimization. You've got a lot of variables you've got to sort through to kind of figure out what the optimum thing is. So that's an area that is being and looked at for quantum computing. Of course, breaking encryption and things like that, so all the whole cybersecurity area. In fact, a kind of a scary thing is at least the groups I'm part of, we're finding that the bad people, are collecting data, and they're pooling it with the possibility that quantum will then be to break the encryption on all the data they're collecting. So kind of keep that in mind, and even though your data is encrypted now and you think you're safe, if it's being collected somehow, then maybe it's not safe, right, with quantum computing. So, we're still trying to figure this out. In fact, I was asked at this, our next FinTech Ideas Festival, this CEO Summit, the largest banks and so on, I was asked behind the scenes, can I bring some of the big quantum people to the summit? So I talked to my friends at Google, IBM, Microsoft, and so on. All of them pretty much have toolkits. So IBM has a toolkit. What I mean by toolkit is a developer could start developing on it, right? And it's available through the cloud, right? And Visual Studio, they're embedding these things into this tool that all developers in the world have access to, and they have a simulator in there, so you could start looking at how you can use this new kind of technology. So it's interesting, when we had our first think tank meeting for these financial services group, and I remember one of the scientists that I brought into the think tank, and I said, we have to look at quantum computing. I mean, keep in mind, this was 2015. And he says, oh, no, you're crazy. It's like 50 years off. And I said, no. I said, it's those 10, it's those outliers we need to look at now, not the things that 90% of the scientists or people think about. Our job is not to look at those, it's to look at those outliers. And guess what? Quantum computing is, you saw the numbers even with the World Economic Forum, right? 43% adoption predicted in the next 3 years. I'm not talking 10 years, I'm talking 3 years. So what I would do is maybe start subscribing to some of the major vendors anyways who produce quantum computing. Rigetti is another, who are making a lot of developments and who have toolkits, to start looking at them. Or at least get teams within your company to start looking at this. So I hope that answered your question.
Stephen, thank you so much for provoking our thought about AI for good. Let's give him a warm, warm round of applause.
So I end by thanking you for allowing me again to share some of my insights with you. I just love this conference. I think you're an awesome group, and you're just making amazing contributions to the world, and I bow to you, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much.